There's a pit crew athlete doing everything right. More reps, more sessions, more intensity, and always pushing. But something starts to shift. Energy drops earlier in the day, sleep doesn't feel as restorative, focus starts slipping during those crucial moments. Nothing obvious, just enough to lose a tenth. And in the pits, a tenth is everything. Now, most would look at that and say, that's just part of the grind. Push through it. But what if pushing harder is actually the thing slowing performance down? Let's break it down before that green flag drops. Yes, welcome back to Breaking Boundaries for Champions, the only high performance health podcast for motorsports professionals. And today's topic, 5 signs training harder may actually be making performance slower, especially for drivers and pit crew athletes. Now, training harder leads to better performance. That belief is everywhere. And to a point, that belief works until it doesn't. Now, I agree that effort matters, discipline matters, training matters. That's how high performers are built. But if more training always led to better performance, then the hardest training athletes would always perform the best, would they not? And that's not what happens. Instead, performance starts to plateau, energy becomes inconsistent, recovery slows down, which raises a better question. What happens when training demand exceeds recovery capacity? You see, overtraining isn't just a muscle issue. Overtraining is a system-wide stress issue. We're talking about stress on the nervous system, stress on hormonal production, stress on the digestive system, and stress on sleep. All respond negatively to accumulated stress. When total stress exceeds recovery, the body adapts by reducing output. It's just a natural conversion. Drivers and pit crew athletes are stacking high intensity training, explosive performance demands, travel schedules, along with random nutrition, sleep disruption, and mental pressure. Training stress plus life equals total load. And when total load exceeds recovery, performance systems begin to downshift. So instead of asking, how can more training be added? A better question becomes, is recovery keeping up with the level of output required? And just to be clear, not giving any medical advice here in the podcast. This is not intended to diagnose or treat any condition. Medical decisions always belong with a licensed provider. This discussion focuses on understanding physiology for better performance decisions. And what research demonstrates and what is often seen in clinical practice is that performance improves when stress and recovery are balanced. A simple way to understand overtraining: the body operates much like a race car. Training equals the throttle, and recovery equals the pit strategy. If throttle stays high without proper pit stops, lap times will fall off. Not because the driver forgot how to drive, but because the system can't sustain output. Now, let's go over the 5 signs training harder is making performance slower. Number one, energy and sleep. This is the most obvious signal. Energy becomes inconsistent throughout the day. Sleep becomes lighter, shorter, or less restorative. And what this could look like is waking up tired after hard training. It's not a badge of honor. That is a signal. It's a signal for drivers and pit crew that slower reactions late in the race or reduced consistency under pressure is a signal that your energy and sleep is struggling because of potentially overtraining. All right, number two, the second sign that training harder is making performance slower is digestion. Digestion slows when stress is high. This is the body's natural adaptation to choose survival over its normal processes. So symptoms might include bloating, irregular digestion, could include gas or loose stool or constipation, and appetite changes as well. So, typically not being hungry, the body is saying, don't put more food inside. So the body deprioritizes digestion in a stress state. All right, the number three sign training harder is making performance slower is libido, one of the earliest hormonal indicators. Reduced libido reflects stress overriding recovery systems. Libido, it's not just personal, libido is a performance biomarker. Okay, number four, we're going to get a little bit more technical here with the signs training harder is making performance slower. And number four is your wearable tech, your wearable data. That wearable tech can often show the problem before performance does. So if you're wearing an Oura Ring or a Whoop strap or an Apple Watch or a Garmin or any of these health tech devices, watch for your resting heart rate trending upward. So we're looking for trends here is the key component. Your resting heart rate trending upward, your heart rate variability, your HRV trending downward, and I'm not just talking from one day to the next. I'm talking over the course of maybe a week or a month, monthly trends that you're looking at. Poor readiness scores is a great indicator, as well as declining sleep scores. These are early warning signs of possible overtraining. And then number five, the fifth reason or fifth sign that training harder is making performance slower is your advanced at-home functional testing results. This is where precision really gets dialed in. So at-home testing, and these at-home tests, actually have one right here if you're watching on video. This happens to be the minerals and metals test. They all look pretty much the same, testing for different things. At-home testing can reveal cortisol patterns. So we're talking about stress load. It can reveal sex hormone shifts. So we're talking about progesterone, estrogen, yes, even in men, and testosterone and DHEA, very, very important markers. And these are taken through a saliva sample, not blood. Very important, because when we're looking at these hormones in blood, they are bound to a protein, and that's not what is available to the body. It's actually pretty much inaccurate information. It does have some value, but not as valuable as saliva testing for hormones. Next would be thyroid conversion. So, if you get thyroid tested in a blood panel from your doctor, they're pretty much testing TSH in most applications, which is TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. It's actually not even a thyroid hormone. It's produced by the pituitary gland. And in some cases, they'll go a little bit further and they'll look at T3 and T4. Again, what we want to look at is free T4 compared to free T3. It's a little different than straight T3, T4. And also, so this tells us if the liver is at, well, first of all, this tells us if the thyroid's producing enough thyroid hormone, which would be the free T4, and if it's converted into the usable form by the liver into free T3. We also want to look at thyroid antibodies. This is known as TPO antibodies on a lab test. This is a blood marker, and it's an early signal of immune dysfunction. Very important to make sure that that one is in range. And then electrolyte imbalances. So many athletes in motorsports are taking salt tabs or drinking electrolyte mixes on a regular basis. But how do they know if that ratio is right for them? They don't unless they run this minerals and metals test. This looks at, so again, back to comparing blood markers, a lot of times a doctor will run chloride, hardly ever magnesium, sometimes calcium. And in blood, the body will actually balance the blood. It'll pull these minerals from different places. It'll pull calcium, for instance, out of the bone into the bloodstream to make sure the blood is balanced. Now, that doesn't mean your body is balanced. How do we know? We look at that through soft tissue. This is known industry-wide as a hair tissue mineral analysis. We call it the minerals and metals test in our practice. And it looks at heavy metal toxicity for one, but it also looks at key minerals, and four of those key minerals are electrolytes known as calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. These are looked at in the soft tissue, and a great way to understand the total stress load on the body, pretty much a 3-month snapshot, as well as the body's ability to handle that stress. When we're looking at the um, calcium and magnesium, and then sodium and potassium. And then we look at those ratios as well on that test. And these markers show how the system is adapting internally. So, because the body prioritizes survival over performance every time it's pushed beyond its performance limits, that brings us into a chronic stress state. And in a chronic stress state, cortisol remains elevated, then eventually depleted once our adrenals are no longer able to produce, right? They run out of the ability to produce cortisol. That's known as Addison's disease. And eventually can get completely depleted. That's when somebody has no energy whatsoever all day long. Recovery processes are reduced and energy systems become less efficient, as well as that immune system. So the body doesn't break, the body protects itself by lowering output. And who does this impact the most? Well, pit crews and athletes training at high intensity, or drivers managing the travel, the stress, the performance, and high performers pushing through fatigue, like team owners that have been at it for decades, and of course, individuals stacking multiple stressors. It really doesn't apply to those who are undertraining or rebuilding their baseline capacity, but that's ultimately where we'll end up, is rebuilding that baseline through something like a graduated exercise program once somebody hits burnout. We're going to do an episode a little bit later in the season about preventing burnout before it happens. So how do we course correct this? The solution is not less effort. The solution is smarter system support. This is where we implement what's known as the de-stress protocol, DESTRESS. It's an acronym for diet, for exercise, for stress reduction, for toxin removal, for rest, for emotional balance, for science-backed supplementation, and for success mindset. This really rebuilds the resilience of the body. And this is a protocol that's taught at the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute. For diet, we want to acknowledge those challenges. It's not easy to fuel our body correctly while we are traveling from event to event for 36, 37 events throughout the year. And then exercise. We want to make sure that we're not overdoing it when we are actually taking the time to exercise. That stress reduction is super important. We want to remove those toxins, because toxic load on the body, and we talked about this in previous podcasts, that toxic load from the environmental toxins, the exhaust fumes, the solvents, right down to the glue for gluing the lug nuts on the wheels, especially in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series or the truck series, right down to those type of toxins have an impact on the individuals that are breathing in those vapors. But for the drivers, for the most part, they're exposed to those high levels of carbon monoxide and exhaust fumes and tire compound fumes and track compound fumes every time they get behind the wheel, and especially if they're running 250, 300, 400, 500 laps or 500 miles. It absolutely builds up and accumulates week after week, and it slows them down. And this is what can lead to that mid to late season burnout that so many, not just drivers, but right down to everybody that travels, right down to the PR people, the media people, the drivers, the team owners, the executives, everybody that's involved in motorsports, the road crew, everyone is exposed to this burnout. So we'll move on to what we call the 5 R's framework, and we're still addressing how to course correct this issue. And the 5 R's are reveal, remove, replace, rebalance, and retain. What are we revealing? Those root causes. How do we do that? Through the functional lab testing done right at home or right at the track. We want to remove those stressors like those toxicities we talked about, We want to replace those nutrient deficiencies. We want to rebalance all the systems. Remember, it's not about moderation, it's about balance. And then we want to retain those long-term results that we get. We want to retain those results once we get there. And we do that through this strategy. So this is the future of performance. It's clear that generic programs don't solve specific problems. Advanced testing plus personalization. So one person's tests results don't make a plan for another person. This is personalized testing through advanced at-home functional testing, and then personalized wellness plans equal precision performance. And you get there working with an integrative health practitioner or a high-performance health coach who provides clarity, who provides direction, who provides efficiency. And this all goes back to that pit crew athlete, training harder but feeling slower. Their energy dropping, their sleep declining, their focus slipping. That's not a motivation problem. That is a recovery problem. And if they don't address that, over time, performance plateaus, injury risk increases, hormonal balance declines, mental fatigue builds, and the gap between effort and output widens. Now imagine, if you will, energy that holds through that entire day, sleep that restores instead of drains, and performance that stays consistent under pressure because recovery matches output. So the final lap here, training harder doesn't always make performance better. Training harder without recovery makes performance slower. And in motorsports, the edge doesn't come from pushing more, the edge comes from recovering smarter. If you're the kind of person who's serious about optimizing performance at the root level, you can apply to work with Victory Lane Wellness over at victorylanewellness.com with programs built for drivers, pit crew athletes, and team owners committed to precision, to resilience, and legacy. And every enrollment supports Race for a Reason, which provides advanced functional testing for chronically ill children and racing-related charities. We will see you in Victory Lane. Bye-bye.